Dear listeners, thank you for supporting us with your subscription. Enjoy watching. For a while, Inger still hoped that Sergei would come home. She wished it with all her soul and was afraid at the same time. She did not know what to say to her husband, how to justify herself. Inger understood that there was no excuse for her and could not be. After Sergei caught her with her lover in the matrimonial bed, there was no way to a naughty life. Her husband's words kept replaying in her head, "I have no reason to live." She had no hope of forgiveness. God, I wish I could see him again. Several times Inger tried to contact Sergei's parents. Each time the phone was picked up by her mother-in-law. She was politely cold. "No. We don't know where Sergei is right now. If he wants to, he'll call you himself." In the end, she was asked not to call anymore and apparently changed her number. She also tried to call Sergei, but his phone was always turned off. At his work, Inger was told with icy politeness that Sergei had resigned unexpectedly and that nothing was known about his current whereabouts. The disappearance of his father was also very stressful for the son. Inger was afraid to tell him the truth and son filed a police report. But she did not hope that it would help. The new year was approaching. Since childhood, Inger loved this holiday, the pre-New Year's hustle and bustle. Inger loved to choose presents. She so wanted to do something nice for them, especially for Sergei. And on the 1st of January, their relatives came to visit them, and the holiday went on. Now it seemed to her that all this had happened once upon a time in another life. Winter flew by imperceptibly. Inger realized that Sergei would never come back into her life. Gradually, she stopped communicating with her friends. She stopped calling her relatives. Marina came several times to try to talk to her, but Inger could not see her, and at the last meeting shouted at her, blaming her for what had happened. Although she knew perfectly well that she alone was to blame. She caught herself thinking that she listened for the lock of the front door to be clicked, letting Sergei into the house. She often woke up in the middle of the night. She thought Sergei was standing in front of her bed silently looking at her. Inger and her husband had a tradition every wedding anniversary. He gave her a huge bouquet of white roses as a symbol of his love and fidelity. So she didn't have hard to throw away the long faded white roses for the last time given to her by her husband on that fateful anniversary of their wedding. Sometimes she would stare for hours, spellbound at the dead, withered flowers that stood on the windowsill, a symbol of the happy family she had once destroyed. One cold March evening, Inger suddenly realized that she did not want to and could no longer live. She looked out the window with an irresistible longing. It was still the same courtyard, the streetlight with no bright rattling light, and all around the darkness in which Sergei had disappeared one cold December night. My heart ached terribly. Unbearable pain spread throughout her body, penetrating to her fingers. Inger went to the kitchen cupboard and took out an empty bottle of cognac. Then she went into the bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed. There was a can of sleeping pills on the nightstand. That should be enough, Inger thought, unscrewing the lid. She suddenly remembered how long ago in the village where she vacationed with Sergei, twisted her leg, and he carried her home in his arms. Spasms choked her throat. Inger poured the contents of the jar into her mouth and drank cognac straight from the neck. Then she used Sergei's razor to slit her veins. She still had the strength to put the bottle on the floor before her legs stopped listening to her and she collapsed onto the bed. In the veil of her dying brain, Inger saw Sergei carrying her in his arms across an endless field of chamomile. She could even feel his breath on her neck, his strong and so dear hands. "Don't drop me. My love, don't drop me." Inger pressed her head against his shoulder. Suddenly, she realized that she was dying, but Sergei was there. And she was no longer afraid of anything. She was at peace with the fact that he was there. The ceiling whirled. Inger was sinking rapidly into a cold black abyss. The last thing she heard before she was finally sucked into the bottomless vortex of death was Sergei shout, "Don't go. You hear me? Don't go." Inger opened her eyes and saw the white ceiling. Is she in the hospital? But how? She seemed to have provided for everything so that she would not return to this world again. At last, she heard an unfamiliar voice. "You gave us a fright." She turned her head with difficulty and saw a stranger in a white coat. "Where am I?" she whispered, her lips partially dry. "In a hospital." "Of course, for the second week. You have lost a lot of blood, a little more and we would have been powerless." "But how? How did you get here?" "A man saved you. The door to your apartment was open. He called an ambulance just in time to carry you to the car. And his blood was transfused. If it hadn't been for him," the doctor threw up his hands. "Where is he?" Inger felt how anxious her heart beat. "All this time, he was with you." "He left a few minutes ago. He asked me to give you this." The doctor nodded his head toward the window where on the wide window sill, there was a huge bouquet of white roses. After lunch, the son and his bride came to see Inger. "Yes, mother, you scared us." The son stroked Inger's hand with tenderness. "What are you up to? Everything will be all right now." "Forgive me, son," Inger whispered softly. "Where is Daddy? When is he coming?" "Daddy," said the son, and he looked at his bride. "Why was he here as he turned up?" "They didn't tell you. He was the one who saved me and called the ambulance." From the excitement in the cough, "Here are the flowers. They are my favorite." Inger showed his a bouquet of white roses on the windowsill. "Mom, some Stas found you and called an ambulance. He said he knew you. You lost a lot of blood and his blood was transfused to you. You are of the same type. Type 1. Inga shuddered. The house of cards of hope crumbled before her eyes. "I'd give you my blood, but you know I'm like Daddy's type A. It doesn't fit you." The son looked at his fiancée again. "This dose was with you all this time. Only this morning he left. He was the one who called me and told me that you came to your senses." Inger was silently staring at the ceiling. "Mom?" My son took Inger's hand. "Are you sick? All you call a doctor?" Inga did not feel the pain of the injection. She fell back into a sticky, frightening darkness. Inga was discharged from the hospital after 5 days. Inga gradually went out for walks, first in the yard, and then to a nearby park. There she met Stas. Elegantly dressed, he came up to India and handed her a bouquet of white roses. The woman involuntarily recoiled. "Hello?" reluctantly said her lover. "Thank God you have recovered." "Thank you for your help." Stas was unpleasant to Inger. He reminded her of the night she had last seen Sergei. "But don't come again. What happened was my mistake, a terrible mistake." Stas hunched over guiltily as if he wanted to get smaller. "I'm sorry if I hurt you in any way. You haven't offended me in any way." Inga fixed her scarf. "Everything is my fault. I'm sorry." She turned and walked slowly down the Ford alley. The meeting was nearing its end when Lieutenant Colonel Messensev, head of the Department 4 Search for Missing Persons, took off his glasses and looked at Prokochip with his myopic eyes. "What do we have on the unidentified corpses?" "There is information about all of them except for the one from December," the captain reported cheerfully. "You know the one from the accident on the highway, no papers. All burned up in the accident, gas tank exploded. All they found was a burnt receipt from a jewelry store for an expensive platinum diamond ring. Must have been a rich guy. We went to the store. The salesman changed. Nobody remembered him. File a report and close the case." "Dismissed." The lieutenant colonel leaned back in his chair. The day was just beginning and did not bode well. 6 months later, anger, divorce.